Welcome to the Thornton Review.
The show designed with you in mind. If it's important to you, it's important to us.
Hi, I'm Pueschel, Schneier, Executive Producer and Manager of the Thornton Review. Thank you for tuning in. Our guest on today's show is Anna Higgins, Senior Policy Advisor for Team 180 Consulting. I invited her onto the show to explain the proposed constitutional amendments we'll be seeing on the November ballot. This is a very important show, especially if you don't fully understand the verbiage of the amendments and what they intend to do. So Anna, I want to really thank you for coming on the show, taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down and have a conversation with me and explain to me the amendments. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So will you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Anna, like you said, Anna Higgins, and I'm a proud member of the Pensacola community. I grew up here in Pensacola, spent a few years in D.C., and then moved back. And I love being involved. And my background is in public policy and law. And I also do a lot of volunteer work, but I primarily focus on life issues and bioethics, and I've branched out from there into other areas of policy, business, regulations, and child welfare.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So we're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Anna Higgins and the proposed constitutional amendments. There is no government-funded program that can guide a man's thoughts. Only God can do that. Alpha Fence Company can install any type of fence. When you call and mention the Thornton Review, you'll receive a $100 discount on your fence. They also offer military discounts. Vinyl fence, wood fence, aluminum fence, chain link fence. If it has the word fence, Alpha Fence Company can do it. 850-586-8020. 850-586-8020.
Hi, I'm Pam Childers. I'm the elected clerk and comptroller, and I invite you to watch the Thornton Review for current information. It's best to stay informed, and you can do that at Thornton Review.
Hello, I'm John Roberts. I'm currently chairman of the Republican Party here in Escambia County, and I want to urge everyone, every citizen of this county to register and vote. We have a very important election coming up this November, and you need to be involved. An informed electorate is extremely important for our nation. One way you can be informed here in Escambia County is to listen to the Thornton Review, where you hear elected officials and community leaders tell you what they are thinking and what they are doing. It's a great source of information. So I hope you'll listen. I hope you'll register and vote. And if you want to strengthen our constitutional republic and you want to preserve and strengthen our free market enterprise system, then I hope that you will vote Republican. Thank you very much.
Anna Higgins was born in Gainesville, Florida, and raised in Pensacola. She attended Pensacola State College and the University of Florida, where she received her bachelor's degree cum laude in political science. She attended Liberty University School of Law in Washington, D.C., where she graduated with honors, receiving her Juris Doctorate degree. Following law school, Anna served as the director of the Center for Human Dignity at the Family Research Council in Washington, D.C., specializing in life issues and bioethics. In this capacity, Anna appeared on multiple news networks and testified before state legislatures and Congress numerous times. Anna and her husband Michael moved back to Pensacola in 2014 when Anna worked as a legislative aide for Florida State Representative Frank White and became an associate scholar with the Charlotte Lozier Institute. She later opened Walker Strategies LLC, a Northwest Florida boutique lobbying firm where she represented several clients, including the Naval Aviation Museum Foundation, for whom she worked to have the Blue Angels license plate created. Anna is now the Senior Policy Advisor at the Pensacola office of Team 180 Consulting, a boutique government consulting firm based in Tallahassee. She also has experience in practicing family law, appellate law, and constitutional law. Anna has served on the boards of the Institute for Women in Politics of Northwest Florida and Safe Harbor Pregnancy Medical Center. She is currently on the board of the Florida Pregnancy Care Network and volunteers with Derek Brooks Charities. Anna and Michael enjoy spending free time with their children, especially their 2 children, Patrick and Adeline. So, Anna, thank you again for coming on the show. I thought you would be the most appropriate person to explain the amendments, because I and a group of people like from church and just around in my political groups are really talking about Amendment 4 especially. So, but I wanted to ask you, since you know the law and you know how amendments get on the ballot, what class of criteria belongs in a state constitution?
I love this question because it brings us back to what is a constitution, where I like to look back at our founding fathers because they obviously got something right. If you look at our history and our jurisprudence in the United States, and what you see when you look back at the United States, the federal constitution, which many states mirror the federal constitution, you see that they created this structure and this framework in about approximately 30 pages that we've used to then build upon to create this entirely successful society that we have today. And what you find in that Constitution are the branches of government, the checks and balances, but in particularly you find fundamental liberties enumerated in the Constitution. So what I like to do is tell people, okay, when you look at what should be in a state constitution, and most state constitutions, just like Florida, are hundreds of pages.
Much longer.
Yes, much longer than the Constitution or the founding document that began the United States of America. And so we have a lot of what I would say is excess information in our state constitutions.
Right.
But what I like to look at is I like to say, how will this affect my fundamental liberty interest? Or how will this affect the power of the purse? Because sometimes we want to make sure that comes back to the people too, taxes and where our money goes. But if it's not a fundamental liberty interest, or it doesn't affect a liberty interest, or the specific powers of the different branches of our state government, then I ask people to question whether or not it belongs as an amendment to the state constitution.
Okay. So what is the difference between a citizen initiative proposed amendment and a legislative referred proposed amendment?
Sure. So there are multiple ways to get an amendment proposal on the ballot in the state of Florida, and you mentioned the two most common ways we see an amendment come onto the ballot. And one is citizen initiative. And so how they do that is, they come up with wording, a group usually, an organization will come up with some wording. Okay. And they have to get signatures. They have to get enough signatures to get on the ballot. So there's a formula, and it's a percentage of the number of people who voted in each district in a certain number of those districts in the state of Florida in the previous presidential election. Okay. So we have 2 that you will see out of the 6 on the November ballot that were citizen or initiated petitions. Right. And then the legislative referral is sort of works like a bill works in the state legislature. It comes up before the legislature. Someone proposes it, someone sponsors it in the House and in the Senate, and it comes up as a legislative referral amendment. And it has to pass by more votes than a simple majority. It has to pass by 2/3 to get on the ballot as a proposed initiative from the legislature.
Okay. So why amend the Constitution as opposed to just passing a law?
That's a really good question. So, when you look at statutes or laws that are passed every year by the state legislature, you see a lot of regulatory issues, a lot of things that are not touching on fundamental liberty interests or touching on really big questions about taxation or government function. And so those can be done by the legislature through bills and that become laws. But those can just be rewritten the next year by a simple majority of the state legislature, or the vote of the committees in the state legislature. So when you have an amendment, though, once that's in the state constitution, it's enshrined in that constitution until something comes up on the ballot and 60% of the electorate who are voting vote to take it out.
Okay. So we probably have a lot of things in the Constitution that need to be taken out because they're just,
In my opinion, yes.
yeah, they're kind of null and void and obsolete maybe. But anyway, we won't get into that right now. That's another
Okay.
show.
That's another show.
So are there guidelines or classifications that determine what goes into the Constitution, or you just
No.
you just have to get the number of votes?
Right, that's
Wow.
it. Yeah. So for citizen-initiated petitions, that's a great question. I think someone where I was speaking last mentioned the whole pig issue, where we had that question come onto the ballot in the form of a constitutional amendment proposal, which everyone found a little bit ridiculous. But because they got enough signatures as required by the formula, that was allowed to be on the ballot. So in response to that, I forget what year we changed this, but now we have to have 60% of the vote to pass a state constitutional amendment in the state of Florida.
Okay. So let's get into the amendments themselves. So there are 6 proposed amendments. 2 of them are citizen initiative. 4 of them are legislative referred. So let's talk about the 2 that are citizen initiative first.
Sure.
We're going to talk about Amendment 4, if you don't mind, first.
Sure.
And Amendment 4 is the abortion amendment. It's I'm looking for my notes. What is Amendment 4?
So, yeah, and just in
I've got
a
everything
short
just-
statement, Amendment 4 is a proposal to enshrine in the state constitution, the state of Florida, a right to an abortion prior to viability, or, this is a very important or here, and I know your listeners who are attorneys or work with attorneys will understand that one word makes a big difference, right? So prior to viability, or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. That's a really important or there. So,
Well, who defines healthcare provider? Who defines healthcare provider, and who defines the patient's health?
and that's a great question. So typically when you see, for example, a bill proposed in the state legislature, there's a list of definitions. Well, here we don't have the definition of either a patient's health. It could include mental health. It could include familial health. It could include emotional health. And we also do not have a definition of healthcare provider. This could be a healthcare provider, could be your dentist, could be your chiropractor that can sign off on the exception to the abortion prior to viability because of a health issue. And, when Roe v. Wade was handed down, another decision, this is very important to remember, was handed down the same day called Doe v. Bolton, which defined health to include any kind of mental health disorder, anything. So we're not talking about limiting these exceptions to to a life-threatening illness. We're talking about any stated health reason that any healthcare provider signs off on would allow you to, or allow a woman to obtain an abortion after viability. So all 9 months of pregnancy, in essence, is what we're looking at here, because there's quite a loophole to the viability question on this amendment.
Okay. Well, that sounds like it's just opening the door to what Virginia is doing.
Yeah.
Which is after the child is born, the mother can make a decision on whether or not she wants to be a mother.
Well, what they've done in Virginia is they decided, and this is where you say, okay, where are we going to stop? If we're going to have abortion all 9 months of pregnancy, why can't a woman after she gives birth say, wait a second, I should have had an abortion, and not provide health care to that child? So instead of, if a child passes away in a certain series of days following its birth, because of lack of nutrition or lack of care from the mother cannot be prosecuted for homicide or any kind of the death of a child. Don't quote me on the exact ramifications of that or the exact law, but that is essentially the idea.
That's sad.
Yeah.
I don't know why anybody would want. So I just can't. I can't fathom that.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
But if we're gonna get to where we can allow abortions for any stated health problem that you may be feeling at the moment, all the way up until the birth of a child, why should we limit? What's so magical about the birth that prevents us from making that decision after birth? So, it's the logical next step,
Well,
really.
you would just put the child up for adoption if you decided you didn't want to be a mother. But now Virginia's talking about this. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm going to get off that.
Okay, sure.
So a lot of money has gone into supporting this bill,
Yes.
I understand. And is the money from PACs? Do you know?
Yes. So the money is from PACs that are backed by organizations that have a stake in the abortion industry. So I don't know if everyone knows that abortion is a very lucrative business for organizations like Planned Parenthood and NARAL. And then, of course, the another organization that tends to back these issues is the ACLU. So different people from these different organizations create political action committees or PACs that raise money to support these amendments, because if they pass, they stand to make a lot of money. Now, that people would say that's slander, that's not true, whatever, but I'm just saying it is a money maker.
Well, they want their intentions to appear good, but their intentions are really money backed.
Right. I'm worried about women's health too with this proposal, because if any healthcare practitioner can say for any reason, basically, that a woman should be able to obtain a late term abortion, is that the best care we can give women?
Right. Is that what's really best for the mother?
Right. How is that regulated? How are we making sure that women are protected?
It seems like it would create a health problem.
Yes. And the other big issue to remember with this is it says it will not limit the constitutional authority for parents to be notified of their minor child having an abortion. Right now, they're required to consent. If this passes, no longer will a parent be required to consent to their minor daughter's abortion. They will then just be notified that it's happening. So, in theory, a healthcare practitioner could be the school nurse for the child who signs off on them having a post-viability abortion for health reasons. And then the parent is not asked for their consent. They're only merely notified before or after the fact.
Interesting. So can we talk about Amendment 3?
Sure.
We're going to get to Amendment 3. We might even touch on Amendment 4 again, but we need to take a commercial break.
Sure.
And I'd like to remind our viewers that the Thornton Review is a civic engagement show with a purpose to spread awareness by interviewing local elected officials, candidates, and professional leaders. This is information you won't get anywhere else. We're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Anna Higgins on the proposed amendments that'll be on our ballot this November. Hi, I'm Pueschel Schneier, Executive Producer and Manager of the Thornton Review. I'm also the Secretary of the Escambia County Republican Party. I want to urge you to conserve the integrity of our constitutional republic and vote Republican. For reliable information you will always count on, watch the Thornton Review. We interview local elected officials. You will not get this information anywhere else but the Thornton Review. There is no government-funded program that can guide a man's thoughts. Only God can do that. Alpha Fence Company can install any type of fence. When you call and mention the Thornton Review, you'll receive a $100 discount on your fence. They also offer military discounts. Vinyl fence, wood fence, aluminum fence, chain link fence. If it has the word fence, Alpha Fence Company can do it. 850-586-8020. 850-586-8020.
Hi, I'm Pam Childers. I'm the elected clerk and comptroller, and I invite you to watch the Thornton Review for current information. It's best to stay informed, and you can do that at Thornton Review.
Okay, on with the amendments. So I'd like to discuss Amendment 3 next, and that is to legalize marijuana. Can you explain to us exactly what that amendment is going to do if it's passed?
Yeah, if this amendment passes, in Florida, most people know we have a provision allowing for the use of medical marijuana or marijuana for medicinal purposes, which requires a physician to sign off and you have a medical marijuana card. This amendment proposes the legalization of recreational use of marijuana. So you would no longer, if you're an adult over 21, you would no longer have to have a medical marijuana card to use marijuana for recreational purposes. And the text of the amendment would limit the number of grams you could have. But in essence, this bill would say basically recreational marijuana for adults is now legal. So the treatment centers you see around town that sell medicinal marijuana, they would then be able to open their doors to adults to purchase marijuana for recreational purposes if this passes.
Just like a liquor store.
Right. Just like a liquor store. I mean, obviously it's not exactly like, but yes. Mm-hmm.
So the 3 gram minimum, or the 3 gram maximum, any adult over 21 can show their ID. They get 3 grams of marijuana. Is that per month or per week? Like how often can they go in and get 3 grams?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's just how much you can possess at one time. Mm-hmm. I think that's what it's in reference to. So if you're found in possession of marijuana, you can have only up to 5 ounces concentrate, 3 ounces other forms. Mm-hmm. But the text of the amendment does say this doesn't make you immune from federal prosecution, but when is the last time the federal government has prosecuted marijuana possession? I don't know. So,
I don't know. I think they're kind of lax on it.
Yeah, I think they're lax on that.
They might be lax on everything, really.
Yeah,
Considering what's going on in our communities, it's not good.
Yeah, so people who support this amendment say, hey, people are going to be doing this anyway, so we might as well make sure they're getting a clean product that's not contaminated with anything dangerous, and that we can regulate it better if it's out in the open, right? Mm-hmm. Well, and the opposition to this says, well, we know that marijuana is a gateway drug to a lot of things. Yeah. And also, this is going to make a big impact on the law enforcement community if it passes, because you can't drive drunk, and you get pulled over on suspicion of driving drunk, you get one of these DUI tests. Mm-hmm. Well, now as law enforcement, are they going to have to test for marijuana as well as for alcohol? So it's going to create, if it passes, a lot of those questions we don't know the answer to.
Right. It's kind of the opposite of what I learned in school. I mean, especially with the DARE program.
Yes.
Dare Not to Do Drugs. Now we're teaching children that it's okay to do drugs because we're legalizing them, and when you turn 21, you can start doing drugs.
Right. I think what worries me is the message we're sending with both Amendment 4 proposal and Amendment 3 proposal, which is just because something is legal doesn't make it right. But when you're raising kids and they see that certain things are legal, like abortion on demand all 9 months, they make assumptions that it must be good for you if it's legal, or it must not be.
It must not be bad. It must not
Right.
be against God's law.
Right. And that some people have more of a predilection to addictions and so forth, and moving from marijuana to harder drugs and other substances.
Right.
And we don't know who those people are if they haven't, tried it yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know, the argument is that it will open the doors for people, and younger people especially. It's worrisome that it would open the door for more younger people
Absolutely,
to obtain
because
marijuana.
if it's legal, they're going to try it, and just like alcohol, a 21-year-old can go in and buy alcohol, and if they have younger friends, 17, 18, 19-year-old friends, and they share it with their friends,
Sure.
it's going to be the same thing with marijuana. And like you said, they can probably get it anyway, but the message that we're sending them is that it's okay now, which we should be trying to shelter our children from evil and from anything that's bad for them, instead of telling them that it's okay. And I know you're going to get it anyway, so here it is.
Right. It's kind of permissive parenting, I guess, is what I would call it. Oh, you're going to get it anyway, but why not?
And permissive government.
Government. Yes,
Yeah,
permissive
our
governing.
government should not be telling us that
Yeah.
bad things are okay.
Right. And they aren't, no matter what. There is a right, there's a wrong. So it is our job as the citizens of the state of Florida to elect people who are going to represent us. And we want those representatives to follow what's right and what's wrong for our sake, for our safety, but also for our sake of our children and the
Absolutely,
future
yeah.
of our nation.
Yeah, because it sends a bad message.
Yeah,
So moving on to Amendment 1,
sure.
which is a little bit interesting. This one is it's not a citizen initiative.
Right.
It's a
Legislatively referred.
legislatively referred, and it's partisan elections of district school board. Now, I like that one, but can you explain it?
Sure. Currently, there are some positions that you go and vote for, some elected offices that are nonpartisan, meaning there won't be a D or an R or whatever party you are after the name that whoever you're voting for. So, school board is one of those currently. And there is an argument, and the reason this is on the ballot is the argument is that we should know where our school board members stand on certain issues that will inevitably affect our children through education. So in order to better understand where these people we're voting for, where they stand, they should run as under the party that they associate with. So that's the argument for it. The argument against it is people say that it could be divisive. It could cause more division, and we don't need that in the education system. People in the education system should be nonpartisan. I would ask the question, are they?
They're not, though. They're clearly not, because I go to the school board meetings and I see how they vote, and they're not voting partisan. You can clearly tell who is Democrat and who's Republican on the board.
Right, and that's the argument for it, for passing this amendment, is to say...
If we knew what they were before they were elected, then it might be different. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean
No,
to-
it's all right. Absolutely. And a lot of people will say, well, it's just a minor office, an office holder. They don't need to run under a certain party. They don't necessarily associate themselves with the entire Republican Party platform. But, typically people who are on the school board tend to move up in other elections, and we want to know where they stand. And also we want to know, from my perspective, being a mom, I want to know where they stand on principles that I find important, that I try to impart to my kids at home, whether that's going to be imparted at school or the opposite of what I'm teaching is going to be imparted at school.
I agree with that. I like that answer. Because I want to know where they stand before I vote for them.
Right.
But I'm the type of person that's going to find out anyway. So.
Right. I'm going to ask the question anyway.
I'm going to have him on the show. So Amendment 2 is another legislative initiative amendment. Is that the right term? And that's the right to fish and hunt. Can you explain that one?
Sure. This one seems odd if you look at it, right to fish and hunt.
Yeah, don't we already have that right?
We already have that right. Let's not bother with this. But the impetus for this was that a few other states around the nation have made it illegal to fish and hunt in their state.
Wow.
So what the Florida legislature is doing is they're bringing that question to the people of the state of Florida and saying, do you want to enshrine in the Constitution a constitutional right to fishing and hunting, which includes using traditional methods of fishing and hunting, to preserve that in your state constitution? Now, this does not do away, this amendment would not do away with the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, which regulates hunting and fishing. So hunting and fishing can still be regulated by the commission if this amendment passes, which they will continue to do. So the argument against it is saying, well, we need to protect endangered species, and of course, absolutely. And
But
that is the job of the commission.
Wildlife, Conservation
Right,
Commission.
right. The legislature just wants to put the question to the people: is should future legislatures be allowed to take this right away from you completely?
No. But I agree with the Wildlife Conservation Commission. You know, just because we have a right to hunt doesn't mean you can go hunt anything and everything in
Right,
endangered
of course
species.
not.
It's deer. It's what you would hunt for.
Yeah, there would still be hunting seasons and so forth. But think about Florida, we have a lot of invasive species like lionfish and pythons
Yeah.
and so forth. So
Well, there was a big campaign to get rid of the lionfish.
yeah, I always go to the Lionfish Festival. I love it. If you haven't been, you should go.
Yeah.
Support it. It's a great cause. But yeah, we want to make sure we have the ability to get rid of invasive species or whatever we need to do to preserve the environment.
So it does fall under the fundamental liberty interest.
I would argue that
that's
it
what
does.
that's what I'm looking at whenever I'm looking at these amendments. Does this amendment fall under the fundamental liberty interest? Okay, so Amendment 5 is inflation adjustment for homestead tax exemption.
Yeah, this is the one with the numbers. So a lot of your viewers and listeners will be familiar with the homestead tax exemption. A lot of them probably already have it.
Yeah.
So what this
Anybody who's a homeowner is familiar with the homestead
Right.
tax exemption, and they love it.
Yeah. So every year, it depends on the value of your home, how much homestead exemption tax credit you get. So what this would do is provide for an annual inflation adjustment for the value of the homestead property tax exemption every year. So on January 1st, your homestead tax exemption will be reevaluated based on the consumer price index, only if it's positive. So that means if inflation
Goes down.
increases, which of course it probably will, you will
more
get
of the
that.
tax
Yeah, you'll get
exemption.
more of the tax break based on the value of your home. If it decreases, you don't lose that money. So the
You don't
amendment,
pay more than you normally
right?
would, yeah.
The amendment says only if the inflation changes to the positive. So if it increases.
Well, that sounds great. All the way
Yeah.
around. Are there any negative aspects to that, though?
Well, yeah, I think it's the League of Cities that's opposed to this. Obviously, the municipalities may lose some tax money. Now, it is important
Right.
for your viewers to note that this doesn't apply to school taxes that we pay. They don't lose money with this. This applies to other municipal taxes. But so the argument against it is we need that money in our cities, in our municipalities, not in people's pockets. But the reason this is in front of us is because it has to do with money, our money. So,
our money, right.
So the legislature thought it best to put it in front of the people.
Yeah. Well, if there's more money in your pocket, there's going to be more money in the municipality because we're gonna be buying things. But
Yes,
they're probably talking
that's-
about infrastructure and things that they need that
Right.
we're not actually paying for. Okay, well, great. We're moving right along. So, Amendment 6, public campaign funding repeal. So that's our money also, or well,
Yeah, it's public money.
it's who we want to be elected. If
Yeah.
I want my neighbor who nobody's ever heard of before to run a grassroots campaign, they should be able to do that, right?
Yeah, so the idea for America is that we have a citizen legislature, right? So that means everybody has a chance to be elected, because whoever the population is being represented, you want someone who actually represents you to be elected, right? Whether that's, someone with advanced degrees or not, or, has so much money or not. One thing I know about campaigns and elections is it's expensive. Very expensive. So the reason we have public campaign funding already, and it's only for the position or the elected office of governor and the governor's cabinet, which is the CFO, attorney general, and ag commissioner, I believe.
Okay.
And so it's just for those offices, and there are strict limitations on what a person who accepts those funds can do. These funds are not automatically given to candidates. They're applied for and accepted by someone who's a candidate who maybe otherwise couldn't run for office because of financial limitations. So that's a reason for it. The argument for repealing this current situation is that it's public money, and that money can go to anyone who meets the qualifications. So a lot of people don't want their tax dollars going to someone who's a part of whatever party they don't like. But it is a fact that this money is open to you no matter what party you're a part of. That's not a qualification requirement.
Okay. So, well, this amendment is interesting because it's a repeal. Is to appeal the amendment that was passed a while back. So it had to go through a special vote than these other ones went through.
Well, it goes through the same legislative process,
Okay.
but it just happens to be a repeal. So
Okay.
it would take words away, which I'm usually in favor of. Just take things out. We have too much. But I think when your listeners and viewers look at this, they should consider both those sides and say, okay, well, do we want these people to have access to these funds? We're talking about these campaigns, millions and millions and millions of dollars. Okay, this is not. The governor and his cabinet, those elected offices are
So it's government,
multi-million-dollar.
agriculture commissioner, and what else?
Chief financial officer
Okay. Just those three.
and attorney general.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. So what do they have to do to qualify for that money?
To qualify for that money, and I'll look at my notes quickly, but they have to agree to expenditure limits. So they have certain expenditure limits that apply to them. They have to raise $150,000 on their own for gubernatorial candidates, but $100,000 for cabinet candidates. And then they have to limit personal loans to their campaign to a certain number of dollars. I think it's $25,000, and then they have to limit contributions from political parties to $250,000. And then there's a couple other things they have to submit to a financial audit following the election, and I think that's it. And all of this money comes from the General Revenue Fund, which is just another word for the state budget.
Okay, so if these people meet those requirements, they can get millions of dollars of public funds for their campaign, for commercials.
I believe it's limited. Let me check
Okay.
my notes. Let's see. What I can tell you is the General Revenue Fund in 2022. There's an expenditure limit of $30 million, which is
Wow.
$2 per registered voter, and the limit for cabinet candidates is 50. So $30 million for gubernatorial, $15 million for cabinet candidates.
Wow.
So that's $1 per registered voter. And I'm not saying that's how much you'll get. You'll get $30 million.
Right.
There are limits, but I think the real issue here is it's public funds. So should we be spending that money here, or should we be spending it elsewhere? The people of Florida should decide, according to the legislature.
So where is the elsewhere?
There's a million elsewhere.
Okay, so that's just
Department of Health,
to be
Department of
determined.
Education.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I like spending it where it's needed.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
So, as far as the legislative side of all of this, can you offer any other information? I love the fact that you're a teacher because I love the way you explain things. You're very easy to follow, and you're very knowledgeable. So, any information about the amendments, about how the legislative side, the judicial side.
Yeah, so the legislative process is really fascinating. I would encourage your listeners to actually learn more about the Florida legislative process. While all legislative processes in the states are similar in the terms of being a representative republic, the legislative process in Florida is different than other states, and it's fascinating how it works. And so to get these legislatively referred amendments, like I said, you have to have more than a majority of the vote. You have to have 2/3 to get it on the ballot. Each bill has to go through multiple committees, and each of those committees has to pass it before it goes to the floor. It has to be on the floor of the House and the floor of the Senate, and the language has to be the same. It's a fascinating process, and it's very complicated. So I think a lot of these, we tend to say sometimes, and I'm not saying this is untrue, that the legislature doesn't want to pass this as a bill because it's too difficult. Let's just throw it to the people. Maybe there are sometimes elements of that, but on these proposed amendments, I can see where the legislature really wanted to have a citizen input here on these issues that are important to the way Floridians live their lives. And but there are a lot of political machinations behind the scenes when it comes to this kind of thing.
So you did some work in D.C.
Yes.
Which is very interesting to me. My son lives in Washington, D.C. right now.
Oh, great.
Yeah, he's working at a congressman's office. So,
how fun.
So loving life. 20 years old, second semester in college, third semester, I guess. Second year in college, and just loving life. Living in D.C., living the high life. He's, 20 years old.
That's great.
Does a good job.
I love D.C.
So, but and when I go up there to visit him, he takes me on tours of the House floor, of the gallery, and everything. So I just think it's very exciting. Well, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But so you have testified to Congress, so you're familiar with the gallery and the House floor. Can you tell us a little about?
So the last time I was in Congress, I was testifying before a committee. So the committees are in the committee rooms, and it was the Committee on the Constitution. And I wrote a paper on sex-selective abortion in the United States.
Wow.
We think it only happens...
Sex-selective abortion. So if somebody doesn't want a girl...
Right. So having an abortion for the reason that you find out that your child is either a boy or a girl.
Wow.
Right. And it happens disproportionately to girls than it does to boys. So we think of this concept as something that only happens in other countries, but it happens here. And we tend to call it in the West family planning, where if you have you have like 3 girls and you wanted a boy, we'll try again for a girl if you're having, or a boy if you're having a girl. So you have an abortion for that reason. So we were trying to make Congress aware that that's happening and talk about why it's a constitutional
Is that actually
violation.
happening? People are actually doing that
Yes.
in the United States?
There are doctors who advertise for family balancing online. Just Google it, you'll find it. And they say, come in and get an early test, a genetic test that will tell you blood
it's a boy or
work
girl.
done.
Yeah.
So you can find out early enough to have an early abortion.
Wow. Yeah. And so you testified to Congress, and how did that go? Like what?
It was very interesting. It's fascinating that testifying federally is very different than testifying in state legislatures. I've been all over the country, and state legislatures tend to be more open to ideas, in my experience. Not that Congress wasn't. It was more of a regulated process. In my opinion, from my testimony, it looked to me like everyone already had their minds made up. And whenever I testify in Florida and other states, I see a little bit more openness in the committee members, willing to listen to expert testimony and maybe change their views if they find that their view isn't supported the way they thought it was. So I really appreciate that about the states and the federal government. I think they should take a cue from the states and be a little more open-minded when it comes to that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate you for your
Thanks.
efforts, for sure. So you've been all over the country testifying to state legislatures on what topics?
So my specialty is life issues, so constitutionally protected rights, but specifically right to life and liberty. So I've done a lot of work on the 14th Amendment, First Amendment, due process, and extending that reasoning or the jurisprudence and reasoning behind why people have fundamental liberties after birth, but not while they're in the womb. So it's a really strange dichotomy. So I find this Amendment 4 to be fascinating because it would enshrine a right to abortion as a fundamental liberty interest, which the Supreme Court has already said it is not a fundamental liberty interest. So the state of Florida, if this bill or this proposed amendment passes, would be more restrictive on abortion restrictions, if I can put it that way, than the federal government. So I think that that's really unconscionable, and that we really need to think. And I really want women to know and understand that there are resources out there if they find themselves in unplanned pregnancies, that we've extended. The state of Florida spends about $30 million a year on pregnancy resource centers that provide material support to women and actual accurate information. And we should be proactively trying to care for women instead of just throwing this easy out, which is not an easy out on women, and saying that's their only option.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of families will, they raise their children to know that abortion is wrong. It's wrong. It's murder. It's killing an innocent life. It's not your body that's being pulled apart and killed. It's the opposition is your body, or my body, my choice.
Right.
Well, it's not your body that's being murdered.
Right.
So it's a separate human being.
Yeah, it's two patients.
And so, but I'm just trying to wrap my brain around growing up knowing that it's wrong, knowing that it's murder, but then the government, your own government, telling you that it's okay, that it's not murder, that it's not a viable life, that it's okay to do that.
And not only that it's okay, I mean, to me, the reasoning behind Roe v. Wade, which really gets me, is that, and in fact, when I was in D.C., I was pregnant with my son, and I was asked a question about Roe v. Wade and the reasoning behind Roe v. Wade, which is basically, if you're a woman, you cannot expect to be equal to a man in all areas of life unless you have a right to abort your child.
Oh, well, that doesn't make sense.
So I'm sitting there with my dream job, pregnant, and I'm like, well, does it look like I feel like I've been limited and I'm not equal to a man because I didn't abort my child or didn't have a choice to abort my child? No, absolutely not. I think it's the opposite of empowering women. And
I do too.
Caring for women like we should, because we know that abortion harms women, especially in mental health disorders associated.
I would think so, yeah. Because I think the most empowerment for a woman is motherhood. I mean, we're supposed to be mothers. We're designed to be mothers.
Yeah, it's actually my favorite job out of all
mine
jobs.
too. Yeah, absolutely, mine too.
It's definitely the most fulfilling job I've ever had.
Yeah,
and will ever have, and it's the most honoring job I ever had. And I will also say for your listeners, my daughter is adopted, and
how old is she?
She's 6 months old.
And when did you adopt her?
We have been with her since the day she was born.
That is amazing.
Yeah, she was born in February. Yeah, and
February what?
28th.
I'm February 19th. I just had to ask you.
Same birth month. But she, her birth mom chose adoption. And she was given that option and she picked it, which I thought, I think is a very selfless thing. And I'd like to help remove the stigma behind what we've always thought of as abortion being closed and you never see your child again, or it's just a shameful thing, or you're just throwing your the responsibility of your kid to someone else. No, it
Right.
can be a very loving,
Absolutely.
selfless experience. So I'm very grateful she chose life, and will forever be grateful she chose life. And our lives are changed forever because of it, and the world's changed because they have baby Addie in their lives now.
Aw.
So yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. I love that story.
thank you.
Well, my son is 20, and just looking back on his life and me being a mother, I'm amazed at how he turned out.
Yeah, you never know.
I know. Because now, he's up in Washington, D.C., meeting everybody he possibly can. And,
amazing.
And I used to take him to meetings, and I used to be the president of the Panhandle Tiger Bay Club, and where we would invite political speakers to
Yeah.
come for a luncheon. And I would take him out of school. I'd give him an
Yes.
absence. And he had so many absences, they wouldn't excuse him after a certain amount of time. But like every political event, every chance that I had to surround him with adults who, are elected officials or who are professional leaders in the community, I would take him out of school and just surround him with these adults from the
Yeah,
time he was in the
it's very
second grade.
important.
And now the tables have turned. So when I go to Washington, D.C., he's taking
He's
me
introducing
around to,
you?
yeah.
That's great. My son's 11, and he's been to more political events than anybody I know. And,
Yeah.
I don't, people are like, oh, you shouldn't, force them to be one party or the other. I'm not.
Oh, I didn't force him. He wanted to go. It was his idea a lot of times to go.
Yeah, I just want him to understand the sacrifice that was made by every man and woman in our armed forces, but not just our armed forces, our first responders, our founding fathers, all the way back there. The sacrifices they all made are significant.
Yeah.
And it's your opportunity and privilege to be involved in them. So when you go vote, take it seriously. That's why we're talking about what we're talking about here, so people understand what they're voting for or what they're voting against. Because, a lot of work went into this nation and continues to go into this nation, and is our responsibility to keep it going.
Absolutely. And not only sacrifices, but decisions that they made, the positive decisions that they made that formed this country, and the laws that we have that are God-fearing, that are based on the Ten Commandments and that are biblical.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, you cannot really, I would encourage all of your listeners to read Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, which I know they won't do because it's like 2,000 pages.
Oh, wow.
But the gist of it is, America.
What is the name of that book? I'm sorry. I'm going to write it.
Democracy in America. And the gist of the book, it's Alexis de Tocqueville, is when America ceases to be good, it will no longer be great. Meaning, whether you believe in a Christian God or whatever you believe in, you cannot deny that there is a divine order to everything. And if that is violated, then there are consequences. So, de Tocqueville noticed that the people of America were virtuous people. They were doing what was right.
They were
when he came and
working, they were
visited.
raising their families,
Right.
going to work.
Right.
Most of them were law-abiding. They were just, the American dream. They're buying a house, buying a car, raising your kids to be lawful and moral, and going to church every Sunday and Sunday school and God-fearing.
Right, and that's what he attributed the greatness of America to.
Yeah, the
is
family.
those people. Yes, yeah. The structure of the family and the way, the moral system that we had in place in the United States. And that is reflected in our representatives. So we need to make sure we're voting for people who reflect our own community values and our own personal values.
Exactly. So the quote is, when America ceases to be good, it will
No longer be great.
no longer be great. Wow. We've got to be careful about these amendments that we
Yes.
pass in our Constitution, because some of them are not good.
Right. Yeah.
2 of them are not good.
Yes.
One of them is terrible.
Yeah, I would say obviously everyone has different views, but I would say enshrining a right to abortion touches on basic fundamental human rights. Okay, we're talking about human rights issues here. So I don't think I go too far to say that is an extremely important decision.
Yeah, because you have a human inside your body.
Yes.
And that human has rights.
Yes.
And that's what our
Should
founding
have rights.
fathers, when they said all men are created equal, they were talking about everybody, even those that have just been conceived.
Well, the first fundamental right we talk about is the right to life. And if you do not have that right, you cannot have any other right.
Yeah, we don't want to take it away from the few, because that's just it's like opening the gateway to what could happen. So we have to wrap it up. I would love to have you back on.
I'd love to be back on.
So be expecting an invitation.
Sure.
And the Thornton Review is on the air to provide public service awareness and intellectual infrastructure to our community. You can watch our program on Pensacola Urban Network, Praise TV, WBQP 12.1 and 12.8, Praise TV on Roku Television Network, or download Praise TV on Google Play Store, Amazon Fire, our website, thethorntonreview.com, and our Facebook page, The Thornton Review Show. This show is made possible by Ida Gates Godly Teas LLC, Alpha Fence Company. Our guest, Anna Higgins, Senior Policy Advisor, Team 180 Consulting. It was such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you.
So wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Great. And we want to thank you for watching this episode of the Thornton Review. Bye-bye.